moved here with my wife to start the Chabad Center here at Cal Poly. And we've been here 11 years, and thank God a lot has Jewish community, from 10 people at our Friday night table to over 100, to having a kosher kitchen, God willing, next year at Cal Poly. We're in the middle of hiring a staff member to make sure it's kosher, so we're very excited. And hopefully we'll be able to go back to school very soon in a normal fashion and not on Zoom. So we're still trying to figure out how we transition to the COVID-19. We're doing Shabbat packages to go, and I just came from a class online to this class online, so it's strange times that we live in, very strange times. But let's get into Kabbalah. So I know that you know some of the background. And I noticed when I signed into the class, it says spiritual extremists. So I hope I'm not considered an extremist. I don't consider myself an extremist. But I will talk a little bit about some extremists. And so some of the Kabbalah. I don't know what you know, what you don't know. So I'm just going to give a brief overview. And then I'm going to a little history, and then an actual Kabbalistic concept. And then I'll open up to me if you have any questions or things you wanted to know. So, brief overview. The word Kabbalah is a Hebrew word, and it literally means to receive. What does that mean, to receive? So, essentially, before we had, printing press, or we had books that you were able to go take out from the library or any store, someone had to teach you. If you didn't have someone teaching it to you, it was very hard to get information because you don't have the book. So all information, essentially, all information was either self-taught by observation, or someone taught it to you. So same thing with the Torah, with Jewish studies, you had the book and you received information. Someone gave it to you. So theoretically, all information is received. But Kabbalah was, in addition to generally being referred to as received information, it was specifically referred to as Kabbalah, which really is mysticism, because the only way to get Kabbalah was to receive it. There was no way to do it by yourself. And for that is because the study of Kabbalah is the study of God. In Judaism, the study of Kabbalah is the study of God. And when we talk about the study of God, there's a big margin, there can be a margin of error. So in order to protect that and to make sure people who are studying it are able to actually understand it the way it was meant to be understood, you were hand selected. It was a hand selection, almost like one of these secret societies or clubs that you have in these universities. I don't know if Cal Poly has them, unless maybe I'm not in on the secret. But secret society, Kabbalah was a secret society. And there were preconditions to be able to be tapped. Namely, you had to be someone, first of all, that had enough knowledge in the other areas of Jewish study to be able to say, okay, you know enough, you're going to be allowed. Another requirement, which is very interesting, is that you had to be at least 40 years old. It was felt that up until you're 40, intellectual maturity to understand it. When you hit the age 40, you don't know if this is scientific, but you see as we get older, we get less, if you will, all revolutions usually were started by young people, right? So when you're 40, there's some sort of maturity that takes place. And okay, I will be able to listen to the information without, I don't know, going wild, if you will. Had to be of the caliber that your rabbi or your teacher felt that you're going to add in Kabbalah. You're not just going to study it and walk away. You're going to enhance the general Kabbalistic study for everybody else. So that was the criteria. So because of that, it was referred to as Kabbalah, because the only way to get it was to receive it. There was nowhere to go and to take a course. So that's where the name Kabbalah comes from. Now, when we say it's the study of God, what does that mean? What does it mean, the study of God? How does that work? So generally speaking, Kabbalah is a very firm believer in what it says in the Bible. It says man was created in God's image. So there's many, many ways of interpreting that statement, all being true. Each way, every one of those are true. Kabbalah interprets the statement to mean that if we study man, we can understand a lot of God. So the way Kabbalah is generally written, the way it's explained, a lot of it has human, if you will, human interactions or human ways of describing things. So take, for example, the human anatomy, right? We use the anatomy of the human body as if man was created in God's image. So man, humans have arms and legs, humans speak, humans think, humans feel. So these are different ways of describing God. So because of that, there's a lot of room here to start, instead of creating man in God's image, it's very easy to create God in man's image, right? Because you're studying man, so it's very easy to say, one second, if I'm a man, I'm a human, I think, I feel, I'm strong, I'm an innovator, so maybe God's the same thing. So that's why they were very careful in who they selected. You have to be able to extrapolate information without putting that information on God. So the study of Kabbalah really is the study of layers. You know that line from Shrek, an ogre is like layers. So where you have to be able to take off the layers, and see what you have underneath, but not make that the definition. So I would say Kabbalah is physics of Judaism. It's the physics of Judaism. I'm going to elaborate on that a little bit as well. In that, let's take. I mean, maybe some of you are computer science or computer engineering, or you know how to code. What is coding, right? It's the back end. So if you ever right click on your mouse and you do source, source formatting, you get this mumble jumble of words, of letters. If you don't know what they mean, like me, you get lost and you don't know how, what's going on over here. But for a coder or a programmer, that if I type this sequence of letters and dashes and symbols, on the front end, we're going to load a new page. You're going to see a whole program based on the back end. So when Kabbalah says, let's study God, it's not just because we're interested and we're pursuing the academic idea of God. It's if God created the world and everything in the world is a creation of God and godly energies. So the more I understand the back end of the world, the more I understand God, the more I understand the back end. And the more I understand the back end, the more I can see the way the world runs, the way the world works, what's the front end, right? So you write the code in the back end, and the front end loads the way you want. So if you think along those lines, again, we have a very big margin, a place where people can make mistakes. Meaning, if you really, really are a coder, right? And someone gives me the back end code, or I'm sitting there and typing something and I miss out a dot, or I change a dot for a comma, the front end doesn't load properly. It crashes, the website crashes, or you're going to have an error loading the page. So theoretically, if you can study Kabbalah and understand, right, and you're able to tap into that coding and play around there, so you can either make miracles or you can crash things, right? You can crash things. So again, who gets to study Kabbalah? We need to make sure that it's not someone that's going to be playing around. But that's one of the reasons why Kabbalists, generally in Jewish, some of it legend, some of it lore, some of it, I don't know, proven until someone disproves it, were miracle workers. The idea being that they were not necessarily miracle workers. They were just people who knew coding. They knew the Kabbalistic coding of the world. So there's a very famous story of the Baal Shem Tov, who was the founder of the Hasidic movement, which is a subsect of within Kabbalistic theory. And there was no light. They were studying in the middle of the night. There was no light. There was no fire to be found. So he cracked off some icicles from outside the door. And he said, the same God that created energy to make fire, so it can make this icicle light on fire, because it's just a matter of knowing which code to put in, and they turned on. So that just, again, it's a story of Kabbalah where there's room for mistakes, and therefore they were very careful with who studied Kabbalah. So that's a little bit of an overview of what Kabbalah is and what the study of Kabbalah is. So within the Jewish literature of Kabbalah, or history of Kabbalah, we've had some very famous Kabbalists. For example, yesterday on the Jewish calendar was the anniversary of one of the biggest scholars of Kabbalah. His name was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and according to some people, he wrote the book on Kabbalah called the Zohar. According to others, he revealed the book of Kabbalah. Either way, he was probably one of the first famous Kabbalists. He lived in Israel. He was actually considered a rebel against the Roman kingdom, who was control of Israel, and he had to hide for many years. The Romans were looking for him to arrest him for treason. So he hid in a cave in northern Israel for 13 years, 12 years in the 13th year, and basically studied Kabbalah during that time, him and his son. And yesterday was the day of his passing. He's buried in northern Israel. Every year on his grave, 200 to 300,000 people come over the 24-hour period of his day of his passing. He asked his passing should be a happy day because it's the day that his soul reconnects to its maker. And study of Kabbalah really, really enhances that idea. So it became a very, very special day in the Jewish calendar. And because of COVID-19, they really closed down a lot of that celebration in Israel. But yesterday was the day of his passing, and he was probably one of the most prolific Kabbalistic teachers ever in Jewish history. And throughout history, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, students who taught students throughout the years. Now, I forget the year. I'm really not good with years. Famous rabbi named Rabbi Isaac Lurie, or he's known by his Hebrew name, the Arizal. Ari means the lion, the great lion. He was also one of the greatest Jewish Kabbalists, and he started a school of thought within Kabbalah. One specific school of thought that was different than the normal school of thought that existed before him. So within Kabbalah itself, we have two schools of thought, which has little ramifications in the understanding of Kabbalah. And the Arizal, who lived, I'm terrible with dates, but what he saw and what he discovered was that he felt that the world is changing, rapidly changing, and he felt that a lot of Judaism was becoming very, very dry, and that people were just doing the motions. They were just, okay, I have to do this, I got to pray, so I pray. I have to this, I do that. And he felt like we're losing the spirit behind, the soul behind everything. And so he started opening up Kabbalah more mainstream. Again, mainstream to today is we're talking, there's a lot has changed. But in his day, the very fact that he opened up and the school was teaching Kabbalah already made it much more mainstream, because it used to be that there was no schools. You had to literally, be hand selected by your teacher. And he all of a sudden opened up schools for that type of learning. And in fact, he made the statement that it's a mitzvah. It's a actual good good deed, if you will, to start making Kabbalah more mainstream. Because again, Kabbalah is the back end. So the more I understand the back end, the more I appreciate what I'm doing. So he felt that if I could understand what prayer accomplishes, right? If I'm able to understand what happens when I give charity, what energies are created, or what wires are meeting each other, then I will be much more inclined to do charity. Because wow, when I take this money and put it there, all of a sudden this fusion happens. Wow, that's mind-boggling. So he tried to teach that as much as he could, to give people back that feeling of, wow, I'm doing something, I'm accomplishing something, right? And the more we get that feeling, the more inclined we are to do it, because I feel like, wow, I'm actually doing something. So that's what he started to teach. And then it evolved more and more until Kabbalah became a lot more mainstream. Just going to throw in one or two historical things, and then I'll go to a Kabbalistic idea. So one good and one bad. One good and one bad. And that is, I don't know, some of you may have been to Prague. I don't know if you've been to Prague, you haven't been to Prague. In Prague, there's one of the oldest synagogues, I think, that are in existence in the world to this day. Maybe the oldest that's still standing and actually functioning. It's called the Alt-No Synagogue. Alt-No means it's German for the old new, because at the time it was built, it was the new synagogue, but it was built off the dimensions of the old synagogue, so it's called the old new synagogue. Today it's very old, but still called the Alt-No Synagogue. And the rabbi of that synagogue was a man by the name of Rabbi Lurie. He was known as the Maharal of Prague, and he was a very famous Jewish teacher. And legend has it, and you can read up on it, and you can research it. It's fascinating because there's huge arguments in the academic world of whether or not this actually took place or not. But legend has it that the Maharal created something known as the Golem, which is modern literature is the basis of where Frankenstein is based off of. And the legend goes that, and by the way, if you're interested and you like this type of stuff, for all the Star Wars fans or one of the Star fans, Leonard Nimoy, right? People are familiar with Leonard Nimoy? Yeah, the guy that did this, yeah? Yeah. So he actually narrated a Jewish story tape, and it's called The Golem, and you can find it online. It's pretty good. It's very interesting if you like this type of stuff, and Leonard Nimoy is the voice behind it. So what was Golem? Essentially, there was a lot of anti-Semitism in Prague, and there was blood libels where the Christians would say that the Jews would kill a Christian, whatever, and use the blood for the Passover. And so the Maharal, as a master of Kabbalah, took 3 of his disciples, him being the 4th. They went out into the woods, and each one represented one of the energies of the world: water, earth, spirit. And he got them each to sort of connect Kabbalistically, and they created a human being. They made a body out of clay, out of earth, and the Maharal summoned a demon or a soul, and he put the soul into the body, and they had this Jewish protector whose job was to patrol the Jewish ghetto and to make sure that there was any anti-Semitism or any things. And after it calmed down, after a couple of years, he put him to sleep, and that he's buried. This body is buried in the upstairs attic of the Alt-No Shul, which you're not allowed in. It's impossible to get into there. They don't let anybody in. But legend has it that that is where he's buried. So again, with Kabbalah, you see how it's not just the study of God, but it actually is creation, and therefore it can be used in creation. That was one interesting story. Flip side of that, and this is where Kabbalah gets a bad rap amongst Jewish people, meaning not all Jewish people study Kabbalah, and some people feel that you're not allowed to study Kabbalah, is because of this story. This man named Shabtai Tzvi. And I would say, going back to the opening of this called a spiritual extremist, he was a spiritual extremist. Shabtai Tzvi, modern day historians think he was probably it's escaping me. He had a mental illness. It was probably either schizophrenic or I forgot. It's escaping my head. He was extreme, mood swings. He was a brilliant man, and he was selected by his teacher to learn Kabbalah. He said, "You're brilliant. We need you in." And again, you have to remember, studying of Kabbalah is, God is very abstract. God is very abstract in most theology. It's something that you have to learn to appreciate, and it could, in any pursuit of knowledge or study, there's a risk of overwhelming your circuits, right? The beautiful mind, right? So he probably went too far, and either felt like he has a godly understanding that no one else has, or he just mentally, had some type of nervous breakdown, or he had mental illness, which is what modern day scholars believe. And he was a very charismatic person, and he started a following. He was teaching Kabbalah brilliantly. So a lot of the Jewish leadership was amazed. And the scholars were like, wow, this is fantastic. And he kept teaching it, and his crowds kept getting bigger, and he was a very charismatic leader. And again, you're talking about a very, very, a lot had to come together to make this happen, but he was in a time where it was right after a lot of, pogroms, and about 200,000 Jewish people were killed in Poland. So people were looking for some sort of leadership. And he had that ability. He attracted a crowd, and he had huge crowds of rabbis who believed in him. In fact, some people thought he might be the Messiah. But then he went a little too far. And again, he was performing miracles, and he went a little too far. And some of the stuff that he did was against Jewish law. Some of them were a lot of them were sexual in nature. And first he was exhibitionist with his wife in public, and then he even divorced his wife. A Torah scroll, which is the Bible, and he said, "I'm going to marry the Bible now." And not to get too graphic, but he actually lived with the Bible, for lack of a better word. And the rabbi said, "Okay, this guy is off his rockers. We're done." But it was too late. It was too late. He had a huge following, and right with cult leadership, you don't realize you're in a cult until it's done, right? And he had a lot of followers, and people really, really, really believing in him. Eventually, the Sultan of Turkey didn't like that this man had such a big leadership, and essentially he's the Messiah. He's going to go to Israel, and again, Israel is under Ottoman rule. So he said, "We got to put an end to this, because I'm not letting anybody take Israel out of my jurisdiction." So he arrests him, and he says, "You have a choice. You can convert to Islam, or you can be killed." And he converts to Islam. So a lot of his followers converted with him to Islam, because again, he's the Messiah, so whatever he does is okay. But he lost another big segment of the population. But for years, and up to this day, up to modern day, there are still followers. They're called Sabbateans, and they still follow and believe that he was the Messiah, or he is the Messiah, and he's a big cat. And again, because of that, many of the Jewish leadership banned the study of Kabbalah. They said, "No more. Look how far you can end up. You can end up, in a different religion." So it became very bad. It became very controversial. And that's why the Hasidic movement, which we can talk about at a different time, was when the Hasidic movement began, there was a lot of pushback against the Hasidic movement, because they felt like you're bringing back Shabtai Tzvi's way of living. So they didn't really like it. But that's sort of the history. Now, a couple interesting points, then we'll give you a Kabbalistic idea. Amongst Kabbalists, which is very interesting, especially if you know a little bit of Jewish scholarship, there are not many women rabbis, or or I'm not gonna say not today. Back in Jewish, the way many women scholars. There were, but not. But in Kabbalah, there were actually some very famous women Kabbalists, and I have a slideshow that I once made for the class, and I think Stephen Lloyd-Moffett has it. But I have some names of famous women Kabbalists who were teaching Kabbalah, who people came to consult with, and their understanding of Kabbalah. So it's quite fascinating. Quite fascinating to know that there were, the study of Kabbalah wasn't just considered, something only. And again, we're talking about a society where there still were not schools for women, right? So it was for many, many years that way. And yet Kabbalah was equally, I don't know, equally, but there were some very famous women teachers, which is a very interesting historical point just to know. Okay, so now let's do an actual Kabbalistic concept. So I find one of the most powerful lessons of Kabbalah, and I think this, to me, this is one of the most, there's so much stuff with Kabbalah. There's where to begin. But to me, one of the most powerful ideas of Kabbalah is this idea, and that's why I want to share it. And that let's go to physics, right? The study of physics is the study of what is everything. What is the world that we live in? What's the makeup of the world, right? And one of the things that we come to is, as we focus and we zero in on the world, we come to atoms, we get to we're getting to small little ideas. Everything essentially is the same, just the way atoms interact with one another makes different things, right? Tables and chairs and humans and so Kabbalah essentially says that. Essentially, Kabbalah says that everything in the world, everything we look at, everything is divine energy. There's a divine everything. And that energy is what gives everything life. Everything gets their life from that energy. And the Kabbalah essentially maybe divides it, I would say, into 2 or 3 categories of energy. And the Hebrew words, I'm going to give you the Hebrew words. One is called Memale, M-E-M-O-L-A, Memale. And one is called Sovev, S-O-V-E-V. Memale, Sovev. What is Memale and what is Sovev? What's the difference? So again, using the human anatomy as a way of understanding, Memale means to fill. There's an energy that fills all space. What does that mean practically? So let's look at our human body, right? In our body, we all have the capacity to see, to talk, to walk, to think. We don't have the ability to do this yet. Maybe one day we will. But theoretically, if I would be able to take the power of sight from my eye, I would know what gives me the ability to see. And I would take that, I don't know, let's use the genome, let's say, or the genetic makeup of sight and put it on my tongue, right? If I would be able to manipulate and put the genetic part of eye to my tongue, would my tongue now be able to see? So Kabbalah says no, because the energy of sight fits eyes. Our body is sort of like a vessel, it's like a glove. Every part of my body is a glove to its energy. So if I take sight, I put it into the socket of the eye, it's going to see. If I take sight, my ear won't see. My ear is not the right glove for it. In other words, every energy has its place. So just like if every finger goes into the glove and it goes into that spot of the glove, every energy goes into its place. So there's a way that the world that we live in, everything has its energy. Everything from the blade of grass to the sun and the moon and the stars has its unique energy. What is that energy? Where does that energy come from? So this is where, and this is, by the way, the structure of Kabbalah is, it takes the Torah, takes the Old Testament, and it reads it. Everything has multiple layers, like that ogre. So you can read the book of Genesis, and you can say, in the beginning, God created heaven and earth. And you can explain it, what does it mean literally? You can explain it, what does it mean allegorically? You can explain what does it mean behind the scenes, right? There's a lot that happened behind the scenes it doesn't say. And Kabbalah says, I'm going to read this happened energetically, if you will. So Kabbalah looks at the story of creation and says everything in the world, this is the story of creation. So everything in the world is here, is in these 30 verses. Everything in the world. When I read it, I don't see, what do you mean everything is here? I don't see computers there. I don't see rocks. It doesn't say anywhere in God made rocks. So how do we have rock? Where does that come from? So Kabbalah explains that first of all, the Hebrew name of everything is the energy of the thing. Every letter of the alphabet has an energy. And the makeup of that energy is what gives it life. So in Hebrew, the word for stone would be even. So even is A, B has an energy, B has an energy, N has an energy, and you put that together, that's how stones are alive. That's how, so the energy, that gives every article, every item that exists in its energy. But again, I don't see the word stone in the Torah. It doesn't say it's the word stone. So that's another study of Kabbalah called Gematria, and this is where Kabbalah goes more on and on and on forever, because everything has a numeric value. Sorry if I'm being a little bit overwhelming. I just want to show you that there's so much. Everything has numeric value. So the letter A has the value of 1. The letter B has a numeric value of 2. But technically B, which has 2, is really 2 1s. So I can take AA, and that will also sound like B. So I don't know, the letter Yud, which is 10, 10 could be 2 5s, could be a 7 and a 3, could be 1 and 9, could be 8, right? So you can get to the number 10 multiple ways. So one of the studies of Kabbalah is, let's figure out the energy, the makeup of this energy. So I can take the same Hebrew word and play around with it and dilute it and to get to the energy. But everything has its energy. Then there is an energy called Sovev, which means all-encompassing. What does that mean? So again, let's go back to our bodies. I think in my brain. I feel in my heart. I walk with my feet. But, right, where am I? I want to walk. Who wants to walk? Me. But where is that? Where's want? Where does want reside? I can put most everything else, I can put somewhere. But where does want live? Want lives everywhere. The second I walk. If walk was in my head, then maybe it would take a split second to walk. Want is everywhere, but it's nowhere. But it's everywhere. But it's nowhere. Is want in my finger? It's not in my finger, but it's also in my finger. In other words, it's an all-encompassing type of thing. When I want, all of me wants. Not my heart, my eyes, me. I want. So an energy, there's an energy of God that's everywhere and nowhere. It's everywhere. It's in the rock, it's in the sky, but it doesn't fit in the rock. It's not in the rock. It's not a glove and a finger. It's all-encompassing. It's all-encompassing. Everything is equal. Everything is equal. 1 and a million are equally the same. I can give you a practical example of this. If you wanted to make, imagine you had the ability to make $100. I want $100, boom, $100 showed up. And I had to say the bill, I could say, I want $1 million, and $100 million showed up. Would a million be worth any more than 100? No, because the only reason why a million is more than 100 because it's harder to get a million than it is to get 100. But if I can want it and it comes the same. So the energy of God, that's Sovev, which is like wanting, everything's equal. You could be the biggest spiritual being, the smallest spiritual being, an angel, a nobody. It's all equally distant. It's like 1 to infinity is no different than a billion to infinity. It's all infinite. So these are 2 energies of God. The Kabbalah, the whole study of Kabbalah is talking about this and what does it mean and how do we interact with it and how does that. But if I know this, and here I'm going to escape Kabbalah for a little bit and go to a little Hasidic philosophy, because the difference between Hasidic philosophy and Kabbalah, I would say, is called inside out. So Kabbalah tells me what's inside. I'm going to tell you what's inside. What's the coding behind the website? But it's like physics. Even if I know what the table is made up of, practically it makes no difference to me, because this is a table and this is a chair. There's no difference. When I sit down, I don't fall through the atoms. I just sit down on my chair. So practically it makes no difference. So Hasidic philosophy says, let's take the inside, let's bring it out. How is this knowledge going to change anything? So the Hasidic interpretation of this is, if everything has energy, and the energy of everything is ultimately the same, then me and you are no different. All our differences are external manifestations. And that's where we get fragmentation. And that's why we can't get along with one another. And that's why I'm a Republican, you're a Democrat, you're a liberal, you're a different color, and you're different origin, different ethnicity. But inside, we all are the same. We all are the same. So Kabbalah, the real study of Kabbalah would be, how do I look at the world I live in? How do I look at the people I interact with and really, really see them as they are on the inside, meaning that we're all one and the same? That's how we get rid of fragmentation. And that is the Jewish idea of Messianic era. Kabbalah says Mashiach is going to come. When the Messiah comes, the world's not going to change. There's no apocalypse or Armageddon that has to happen and the whole world's going to zap. All we're going to be is we're going to see the world we live in with Kabbalah glasses, that we see the world the way it is. And then, of course, I'm not going to cut down that tree because I like cutting trees. Because look at the tree has an energy. Of course, I'm not going to pollute the ocean, because I look at the ocean and I see me and the ocean were from the same place, right? So that's the idea of a Jewish Messianic idea from Kabbalah standpoint, is you're going to see the coding behind everything. And when we see it, we interact differently with them, with each other. That is, for me, one of the most powerful ideas of Kabbalah. And I think if we make that study of Kabbalah more applicable, then I'm very for study of Kabbalah, because the more we study, the more we're in tune with one another, with the world we live in, and it's a world that I do want to live in. So that's my bit, and then I'd love to hear questions. And if you have any questions too fast or too, let me know.
Yeah, Rabbi Chaim, that was great actually, and it's interesting because I get more every time. Can you describe the Sefirot and
Sure.
and all of the Tree of Life stuff?
Sure. So you may have been familiar. You may have seen a diagram. I'm going to try to find it. I don't know if you have it.
I've got one. I'll put it up.
Okay.
And now I just need to share my screen. There we go.
Okay. So you see the screen here. So again, energies of the world. So again, Kabbalah is talking about the energies, and one of the fundamental Kabbalah is 10 energies. Now, a very important concept when it comes to Kabbalah is called the theory of relativity. It's not the real theory of relativity, but it's the theory of relativity, in that relative to what you're talking about right now. So is there 10? There's more than 10, but relative to other things, there's only 10. But within these 10, there's 10, and within this, there's 10, and within, so, but generally speaking, everything can be broken down into 10. Now these 10 energies, again, looking at the human person, the human being. So we all have these, and then we can again understand what this means to God. So Keser literally means a crown, or your skull, or the energy that's above your head. So there's what precedes me. So crown is worn on top of your head. Keser represents energy that's above the world. Like I said before, Sovev. It's the energy that's all encompassing. A crown surrounds your head. So there's an energy of God that's like a crown. It goes ahead. But then this energy needs to go down. It needs to interact with the world. So we have different ways that the energy manifests itself. And again, we look at the human being and we say, these are the things that we have as humans. And then we can abstract and say, these concepts exist in divine energy. So I'll go quickly through these. Chachma, Bina, and then over here, there's something called Dat, which is not here because when you count this, you don't count that. But if you look at Chachma, Bina means wisdom and understanding. So every human being has wisdom and has understanding. Wisdom is that spark that, oh, I have an idea, but it's not yet elaborated. Let me understand what I just said. Let me pull it apart. Let me pull it apart a little bit. And then there's Dat, which is not here, but Dat is essentially connecting to the idea. So, for example, somebody discovers, the first person that discovered, I don't know, let's make it relevant. Whoever's going to figure out why this guy got COVID and this one didn't, right? For example, my brother-in-law had it. His wife didn't have it. They live together. They're living together. He had it in his system for like 4 to 6 weeks. Very long time he had it in his system. But his wife didn't get it. She tested negative multiple times. No antibodies. So someone's going to figure out why. There's going to be a spark. Boom. Chachma. Then they're going to try to figure it out. They're going to try to come up with a paper or a study that's going to be Bina. It's going to pull it apart and understand it. And then they're going to say, I don't know, let's say they're going to discover that, well, she eats cheesecake, and cheesecake doesn't allow COVID to enter your body. I don't know. So then, okay, fine. So I have an understanding, but what does it have to do with me? So we go to Dat, and Dat now connects. It's knowledge. There's wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Knowledge is that it's not just a theory. The knowledge is, how do I connect to the theory? So now I know that if I eat cheesecake, I'm not going to get sick. Okay. What comes after that? Emotion. Emotion. Well, wow, I love cheesecake. You go to kindness or chesed or love. Or gevura, I really, really hate people that don't eat cheesecake. Strength, left side. And eventually, basically, we go down in the spectrum of human emotions. We have love, we have fear, we have compassion, we have victory, we have application, we have connectivity, and we have speech. Everything that we do, we think, eventually we do something about it, right? Then I'm going to eat a piece of cheesecake. So that's the action. I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to have action. And again, sometimes you'll see this chart with the human body. So you'll see this is the head, this is the right arm, the left arm, this is the genitalia, and the action. So all of this is essentially a way of understanding the energy of God. And when the more we analyze each specific thing on this page, the more we're able to really understand how the energies work. How does what energy connect to? Do they interact with each other? How they interact with each other, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then, again, from Kabbalah, I mean, there's so much to talk about, so I don't want to just go too much, but yeah, open up to any other questions. Wow, no questions. Don't be scared, you can ask.
Well, I guess not a question, but I'd just like to say thank you for explaining the golem. I was in Prague this summer, and someone tried to explain it to me on the street, and I have on my keys now. I have an artistic representation of that figure.
Nice.
And
they have a statue. They have a statue in Prague.
Yeah, yeah, and it was super cool. I was right past like the Charles Bridge, so it was cool hearing that. But now you more to actually understand what it means.
Yeah.
So, not a question, but thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? No, I can teach you more Kabbalah. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, on the Sephirot part,
Yes.
is that supposed to be like the inside of God, or like, because that's how it's been described to me, but I've never quite made sense, because it's like God has multiple parts or something.
Right. Again, so this is one of the reasons I said earlier. One of the reasons why we're very careful with the study of Kabbalah.
Yeah.
Because again, what we're doing is we're creating the image of man in God, right? That's what we're doing. So we have to understand that everything is really, it's a way of abstracting information. All of our knowledge is what is there, but what's not really there. In other words, the more we understand our human capacities, the more we can see that there's this element of God, but that's not God. God has to. But the way God interacts with the world is by using these mechanisms. So it's one God, but I'll give you an example of it. In a lot of modern day literature, you can find. Okay, so I have a cup, right, and I have liquid in this cup. What color is the liquid? Nothing. It's clear. It's clear liquid. But if I don't have one over here, but if I had another cup that was red, and I poured the liquid in, what you would see from this side, it would look like it's red. And if a blue cup, I'd have a blue, it would look like it's blue. But when I pour it out, it's all the same color. It's all clear, right? So the energy of God is clear. There's no multiple energies. It's one energy. That energy, when it goes into the cup of this, it becomes chesed. It becomes an energy called chesed. When it goes into this vessel, it becomes an energy called red energy. It becomes gevura. And each energy has a certain specific tasks. So it's one thing doing multiple things versus 10 different, right? Judaism doesn't believe in multiple gods. It's one God. So it's one God that's doing a bunch of different things using vessels, so to speak.
But and if we can sort of travel into that, does that mean that we can change God or accent some element of that energy?
Good question. We could accent some, like, I mean, the same question can be asked theoretically about prayer, right? What's prayer? If I'm praying for something, am I changing God's mind, right? So it's a question on general theology. What is prayer? What is, if God is God, then how can I pray for something to be different? But that's a separate field. But there is an element that the Zohar says. The Zohar is the fundamental book of Kabbalah. The Zohar says that the way God set up the system is that it's almost like a mirror. And when we do something, we have a mirror effect up there. So we can play around with the energies. We can affect the energies, but to the extent that God allowed it to be affected. To the extent that God allowed it to be affected. So we're all playing with the. We're not going to the source. So we have no way to get the source. But we're able to interact with its manifestations.
Nice. Are there other questions for Rabbi?
I had a question about the female Kabbalists you mentioned. Do you have any names or people that you were very excited about?
Yes, I have it right here. I will pull it up here from current slide, and then hold on here. I will share screen. Bam. Oh wait. Okay, and then.
Right. The first one was Madonna, which I don't consider her a famous Kabbalist.
Yeah, so you could have Madonna Kabbalists do it better. There it is.
And you can Google them and read up. There's some great stuff to read about these people. I usually get the question about modern day Kabbalah. If some of you, I don't know, anybody's from LA. There's a big place on Pico Robertson. It's called the Kabbalah Center. Recently, last quarter, I think some students in your class had a talk with me. They wanted to know about the Kabbalah Center. Again, Kabbalah's new age. Everybody's into new age stuff these days, right? So you have to just be careful when you study and who you're studying with, and are they trying to sell you a product? I'm a believer that if someone's trying to sell you a product, then it's probably not authentic. They're pushing Kabbalah, and if you buy this magic water, you're gonna grow your hair back. That's not. So people asking about the Kabbalah Center, that's maybe when I still had classes. Kabbalist. But Kabbalah Center, to me, to me personally, and again, everybody's free to explore what they you know, to me, it's not a fair representation of Kabbalah. You know, to me, it's commercialized Kabbalah.
Yeah. Does that go back to the idea that Kabbalah was reserved for people of a certain moral character, people of a certain experience?
I'm not going to knock anybody's moral character because I'm not a judge of character. Yeah. But commercialization, I think, to me, it's more about the commercialization of it. Like, let's take advantage. Everybody's into new age stuff, so let's rebrand it as a new age thing and make it into. I think that's whatever. It's you know, not contaminating, but it's like, you know, I want to learn it the right way. I want to know how it's going to make me a better person. I want to know how it's going to, not just because I can make a buck. So let's repackage this and I'll make $1, you know?
Is there a way to be Kabbalist without being Jewish?
Yeah, study the Kabbalah. Study it. You know, again, the trick is to find a good teacher. It's like any other thing. You find a good teacher, you find someone, and today online, there's so much online. You find someone that you appreciate their style and you appreciate the way they speak it, and then just keep studying. And you know, I would venture to say that you have to learn original Hebrew, because then you're not reliant upon other people's translations. You can actually do it yourself, but that takes time, like any other study. Like somebody that wants to study, I don't know, ancient text, they need to learn Latin. If I'm relying on someone's translation of the Latin, I may be wrong. That person might have had an agenda, or that person might have mistranslated one word, right? So I would say study Hebrew, ancient Hebrew, at the same time. Yourself, read the books yourself, get a teacher, read the books and say, hey, how does it work? Does it fit? Does it not fit? And become a Kabbalist.
Any final questions for Rabbi?
Just interesting. A lot of the legends and the lore that you read about in modern day, you know, Disney stories or Disney characters or you know, these books, a lot of that stuff, I would say close to 80 or even higher, 90%, you will find that story in Kabbalah. And the difference is that Kabbalah uses a lot of allegorical stuff, a lot of things they use as a way of making a point. But when you see it in the, you know, but people took that and say, well, that story had to have happened. That story had to have happened because the Kabbalah says it happened. But it was not meant to be. It was meant to be understood allegorically, or it's trying to make a certain point. So again, that has to do with the teacher, who your teacher is. You know, there's a lot of room to go off the beaten path.
Rabbi, is there a good translation of the Zohar?
I don't know a good translation of the Zohar. There is. It's hard to read. If you go to Kabbalah.tv, I think it is. I'll check right now. They translate the Zohar, but it's almost like reading Shakespeare. You know, when you're reading Shakespeare, if you haven't spent time reading Shakespeare, then it's hard to actually know what it's actually saying. But the site is, I don't know the direct link to it. If you go to chabad.org/Kabbalah, they have a translation of the Zohar. There's a lot of good stuff here. If you want, if anybody's interested in Kabbalah, there's a lot of good stuff on that.
Well, any final questions? Good. Well, once we're all back in slow and interacting again, I encourage you to go to Shabbat dinner at Rabbi Chaim's house, and everyone always is welcome. It's always an interesting event for everybody, whether you grew up Jewish or didn't grow up Jewish. It's a good event. So I don't know if we can clap silently in it. Well, thanks, Rabbi, and thanks to students. As I said, next week we're not going to do any live sessions, but the following week we will. And I was going to say, Rabbi, the spiritual extremist is not like religious extremists. We take that as a negative view. Spiritual extremists are the ones who aren't satisfied with just simple experiences of faith or the prosaic one, but who really want to get deep into it. and go to an
In that
extreme.
case, I'm an extremist.
Yes, I would say you fit right in, and it's a good thing that you don't want to accept just what happens for an everyday person every day, but want to have some profound experience. So that's what the whole class is centered around. So have a spiritually extreme week.
Thank you.
And we'll see you in 2 weeks, but you'll get emails from me along the way. Okay, peace out, guys.